Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Aaron Choi, and today we have Natalie Joffe here, a certified nutrition coach and personal trainer. She's really passionate about helping her clients create a healthy, positive relationship with food, body, and movement. And we were introduced by a mutual friend, and we had a great conversation over coffee about, um, why is it so difficult for people to make changes around diet, and why is there so much guilt around weight? And today we'll be addressing some of those things in detail and understanding where Natalie comes from and how she approaches things. So welcome, Natalie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wanted to just start maybe. What was that? What was one of those first experiences where you didn't all we weren't always a nutrition coach or personal
Mhm.
trainer. When was it that you decided, oh, I want to help people with nutrition and their bodies, understanding their bodies?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for me, I struggled with an eating disorder in college, and so had that experience. And then also had an experience as an athlete all through college of just seeing a lot of body image issues amongst athletes and this pressure to be a certain way. And as I went into corporate healthcare right after college, and in that industry, I didn't feel like I was helping people in the way that I wanted to. Creating, can we pause? All right, I'm just going to start over with that question.
Yeah, where were
Uh,
we?
okay, so how did I get into?
Yeah, how did you get into the nutrition coaching and personal training when it doesn't sound like you were kind of in the healthcare industry really before that?
Yeah. So, as I was saying, in college, I had my own journey with an eating disorder. And then also being an athlete, seeing the body image struggles that came up around athletics or the pressure to be a certain way. And after college, I went into healthcare research and then healthcare consulting and advocacy work. And it was just being a woman in this society and seeing the body image and disordered eating that was so prevalent. And I didn't really feel that there were a lot of good resources for women and men. And I really wanted to work with clients on a more long-term basis. I think a lot of the healthcare consulting work and healthcare research work, more traditional medicine, it's short visits and not really looking at everything, the psychology of what's going on underneath conditions. And I feel it's the same for nutrition. It's a lot of just like, here's a plan, go do it, versus asking what's actually going on underneath. And so at that point, I went on and got a nutrition counseling degree and really started delving into nutrition psychology. And through all of my experience and just being, like I said, a woman in the society, created a program and a way of working with clients to address these concerns.
Yeah, I think that is so important. So even as a naturopathic physician, we're taught the importance of diet and avoiding food intolerances. But sometimes I'll hear people say, I can't eat dairy, gluten, wheat, corn. What's left to eat? So that
Ice cubes.
ice cubes and water.
Yeah.
And often it can create a very broken relationship with food. So,
Hmm.
especially with the holidays coming, the new year, people are trying to create, have resolutions to be healthier and eat
Hmm.
better. What's the difference between someone who can have a healthy relationship with food versus someone who just becomes paranoid around everything they
Hmm.
eat?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's helpful to understand the difference between the diet and the non-diet mindset. So someone with the diet mindset when it comes to food is viewing food and asking questions like, how many calories does it have? Is it time to eat? Is it a good food or a bad food? Whereas someone with the non-diet mindset around food is asking, how hungry am I? Is this going to fill me up? How is this going to make me feel? Am I going to feel satisfied? So this sense of deserving food without guilt or judgment. And then also with the diet mindset, when it comes to movement, it's all about what I call cosmetic fitness. So how is this going to make me look? Whereas the non-diet mindset is metabolic fitness. So How is this going to make me feel? Do I even enjoy this type of movement? And then when it comes to views of progress, the diet mindset is all about how many pounds did I lose? How many calories was I able to stick to today? How's my willpower? How do I look? Whereas with the non-diet mindset, there's this trust that when we're attuned to our internal hunger and fullness signals, our bodies stabilize at their healthy weight. And that health is about behaviors versus external results, or how we look at externally. So yeah, I think people who can cultivate that non-diet mindset are the ones who go through the holidays and into New Year's without that guilt and food stress. Whereas people who live in that diet mindset are the ones who are just constantly battling that.
So for someone who's maybe tried a diet or two, what kind of keeps them going from one diet to the next? It's the Atkins, and even like the ketogenic diet, which I'm a fan of. People can become so obsessed. So what keeps them just kind of hopping from one to the next?
Yeah. When I work with clients, I talk about the diet cycle and really helping them understand exactly that, what keeps us stuck. And so if we think about the diet cycle, it starts with the quote unquote problem behavior. So say that's emotional eating. Now, there's a reason why we're engaging in the problem behavior. I believe that all of our decisions in life, and especially around food, are rooted in a sense of wisdom. The body is trying to take care of itself in some way. So, for example, maybe with emotional eating, it's late at night, the person is stressed out, they are using food to unwind. Or they're at work, they're bored, they really just need a break, and food feels like a productive reason to step away from the desk. And then what happens, though, is when we engage in that quote unquote problem behavior, there's this onslaught often of really critical, judgmental thoughts. So things like, why did I do this again? I've got to get my crap together. Like, I'm so lazy. All of these really, harsh things that we tell ourselves. And that triggers shame, frustration, disappointment. And it's from this really uncomfortable place that the plan starts looking really good. So that idea of tomorrow, ... or Monday, ... And these
January,
in January, exactly, January 1st. And, whether it is, Atkins, ketogenic, Weight Watchers, paleo, all of those provide this distance from the shame and this idea of, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make it better. It's going to be okay. And we as humans love that and crave that feeling. And what happens is we start the plan and there's a honeymoon phase. It's working. You're able to stick to it. It feels good. But then life happens. We're back at work, stressed out, needing a break, or it's the end of a long day, or it's the holidays and you're surrounded by all the foods that are not on your okay list. And you get right back around to the problem behavior, right onto those negative thoughts, the emotions, right back to the plan. So we just keep going around and around in that.
So then we should just give up, right? No. So then, as through your work as a coach, how do you help people free themselves from this crazy, guilt-inducing vicious cycle?
Yeah. So I often, when I talk about the cycle with clients, I'm like, well, where do you think you can exit it? And I often hear like, well, I just need to stop doing the problem behavior. But we can't do that because there's a reason why and life's happening. So it's taking that step back and looking at what is it that actually needs to be fed? What is it that is actually asking for attention? So whether it's overall stress reduction, whether it's, you're restricting and so you're hungry and that's why you're then overeating. So looking at that, and then after that, or alongside of that, practicing self-compassion work. Because if we can start to shift that judgmental, harsh inner critic that pops up around food, so all of these shoulds, I should be able to do this, I shouldn't be eating that, this should be easier. When we can shift that, then the shame or frustration or guilt really diminishes, which decreases the pull towards the plan. And then lastly, when you're feeling the pull towards the plan, being able to take that step back and say, okay, I know this plan is going to lead right back around to the problem behavior. So instead saying, what would the intuitive food choice be at my next meal or snack? So instead of going from, I've just overeaten, so now I'm going to restrict, saying, what would that middle ground be? So something balanced, something not restricting and not overeating, and continuing to make those decisions instead of that diet decision. So those are the main areas that I target with clients to kind of get out of that cycle.
You mentioned intuitive eating, and sometimes people can say, does that mean there are no rules? I know for myself, I've developed this sense, but in the beginning, it's like, so if there are no rules, how do I decide what to eat? So what's
Yes,
the
I
difference
often get that.
between rules and making intuitive choices?
Yeah. Yeah. So intuitive eating is all about getting out of our heads and into our bodies. So letting go of all of those external rules and diet constructs and starting to be able to get in tune with our own internal hunger and fullness cues. So when we're little kids, we're intuitive eaters. You see a 3-year-old eat and they're halfway through a snack and they're done. But then we learn not to trust our bodies, whether it's parents telling us to, clean your plate before you can leave the table, or rules around don't eat after 8 p.m. and carbs are bad, don't eat, refined sugars, all of these things. We start to believe that if we, just ate what we wanted, we'd only eat pizza and ice cream and expand exponentially, which isn't true. And intuitive eating is about relearning how to identify our hungers, whether it's taste hunger, something just tastes really good, or experiential hunger, it's the holidays and Thanksgiving, having pie is part of that experience, or it's a birthday, having cake. Or is it emotional eating? Am I trying to soothe an emotion? Or is it physiological? My stomach's growling, I'm physiologically hungry. And being able to know how to respond to those. And in terms of the rule part, I like to think of intuitive eating as compassionate parenting. So if you had a child that you were trying to raise and teach how to eat, you would make sure that you'd planned ahead, you had food in the refrigerator, you have a variety of food, you have food the kid is going to like, you're going to have nutritious food. And then if the kid asks for ice cream for breakfast, you're not going to say, no, you can't have it because there's too many calories and you're fat and gross, which is something that we would, tell ourselves, right? But you're not going to tell that to kid. You'd be like, no, it's important to start the day with some more nutritious food. Ice cream's totally fine. Let's have it for dessert later. So it's about being able to do that for ourselves. So identify sometimes when cravings arise, being able to tell ourselves, not bad, not good, and it's not going to make me feel the best right now, so I'm going to wait and have that later. And in planning ahead, making sure that we do have foods available without it being this really shaming, harsh inner critic voice, like you can't eat this, you have to eat this, or you have to food prep. Shifting the way that we're talking to ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. Like changing the tone of the inner voice in your head from like a really critical voice to, I love that. Talking to yourself like you're raising a child and being supportive. So I hear a couple things in that, like the importance of creating, systems. Like if you're trying to eat less chips, and that was my thing. For me, it was like, okay, stop buying chips. Like if they're not around, it's a lot harder to eat them.
Yeah. And I think dieting is so shame-based, and change rooted in shame doesn't last. So I think a lot of people, step on the scale and they're like, well, I use that number to like snap me in to like, keep me on the straight and narrow. But when we're constantly just, shaming ourselves around food, instead of approaching it from a place of compassion, we just get stuck.
Yeah. That brings up an interesting question for me, is like when the conversation around weight comes up, there's so much obsession around that number. But for me, I understand that weight is just a measure of like mass. Like if you say, it doesn't tell you anything about how healthy you are.
Right.
Or, and it changes throughout the day. So how do you have that conversation with one of your clients who's been so fixated on this number?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you said it exactly. Like health is so much more than the number on the scale. And as a weight neutral provider, I focus on more important indicators of health, such as, lab work, stress, sleep, movement, all of those things. And often clients, when they are talking about the body and weight, they might be saying, okay, well, I want to do it for my health, but there's also this body image aspect, which we talk about. And we live in a weight biased society, and a society of thin privilege, where the thinner you are, the more attention you're going to get, and things like clothing shopping will be easier. But really, it ends, when it comes to body image, it ends there, because many of us have had the experience of, say, losing that 5 pounds or that 10 pounds, but then the old insecurities are still right there behind you. And so when I work with clients, I work with them around things that are more impactful on body image than weight, and focusing on, like, I need to lose weight. So things like clothing. So if we have clothes that actually fit us and we're not constantly like feeling tight in our clothes or adjusting our clothes, that's going to improve body image. A lot of clients have a closet full of clothes they don't like or that don't fit. So it's a constant reminder that they're not okay. And then things like social media, are you following Fitspiration or food porn, your perfectly portioned like broccoli and chicken and quinoa dish, or this fitness model? Those are all reminders of where you're not and where you quote unquote should be. And that doesn't support body image. So trying to look for things where there's more body diversity, or just cute puppies that are going to make you feel good about yourself. And then movement. When we move for that metabolic versus cosmetic fitness, so moving for the endorphins, the connection with our bodies and with others, and what feels good, we feel the strength in what our body can do, which helps shift the focus to that versus what the body looks like. And then intuitive eating. So if we're dieting, then we're either going to be hungry or feeling deprived, or because we're dieting, we'll then binge, and then we'll feel overly full and uncomfortable and, depressed about it. So that's not going to support good body image. Whereas if we're eating intuitively and we're feeling physically comfortable and physically well because we're making these choices that make us feel the best that we can feel, that's going to also support body image regardless of our body size. So yeah, when I work with clients, it's talking about and holding space for the weight piece, but also focusing on the things that we actually can change, from clothing to social media to food, a relationship with food and movement, and working on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that when we take care of ourselves and we're compassionate and we are truly healthy,
Mm-hmm.
our weight lands where it needs to be without worrying about it.
Exactly. And there's this idea, a philosophy that I practice, of health at every size. It's a specific type of nutrition approach, which, yeah, that, like all things, whether it's height or foot size, there's a bell curve. And just because you might live in a larger body doesn't mean that you're not healthy. And trying to shift people away from those generalizations and assumptions of people just based on their body size.
So, with that, and we're, less than, well, we're a few days from Christmas and the holiday and New Year's, and we're going to be around going to parties and getting
Mhm.
chocolates as gifts and stuff. Uh, you know, how do we kind of work with that? I want to enjoy the holiday, but I don't want
Mhm.
to go overboard during the holiday season.
Mhm.
How do we handle this? And then into our resolutions, is there a way to smoothly navigate the dangers of we won't call
Mhm.
it dangers of the holiday, but the temptations of the holiday?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, like, what you're naming is this thing that I talk about, all clients bring up, like cravings. How do I handle cravings and these urges to just like eat all the things? And when it's sort of like a pendulum. When we're in the diet mindset, we're in one end of the pendulum of restriction. And what happens is this self-fulfilling prophecy, where as soon as we then when we're saying, okay, I can't have the chocolate, I can't have the cookies, as soon as we get our hands on a cookie, it's like this all or nothing. Well, might as well eat all the cookies, because who knows when I'm going to get cookies again. So it's that fighting for homeostasis, that equal and opposite reaction in the other direction, which then people are like, see, I can't control myself around food, so I must go back to restriction. So it's when you're having that mindset that you're going to really run into trouble in the holidays. So working on shifting that is really important. But then also just in terms of cravings in general, if you're not eating enough calories, you're going to crave food, especially carbohydrates, that quick energy source. If you're not having enough carbohydrates, you're going to crave carbohydrates. And if you're not getting enough variety, then as soon as you taste something more rich or indulgent or different, you're going to have a hard time controlling yourself because it's novel and your body's like, I don't know when I'm going to get something like this again, and you'll overeat on it. A lot of diets restricting calories, restricting carbohydrates, and restricting variety, setting up people going into the holidays and ending up in this cycle. Once those things, I address those things with clients to see where they're at. We focus on satisfaction. So not just in the holidays, but this bigger picture. If we're eating foods that are satisfying to us, then we end up eating less and we end up being able to navigate things like the holidays without this urgency to eat all the things, because in general, on a day-to-day basis, we're not feeling deprived. We're enjoying the food that we're eating. It takes the pressure off of those events. And then lastly, this idea of full permission. So full permission is sort of like the habituation effect, or exposure therapy. So if you're afraid of heights, the more you avoid heights, the more the fear builds. So in order to get over your fear of heights, you slowly, get a little bit higher and higher, sit with the discomfort, adjust, and soon you'll be able to be on a high ladder or 40 feet up in, 40 stories up in a building looking over and feel, maybe not loving it, but feel okay. And it's the same thing with these forbidden foods or trigger foods. If we never engage with them and put the chocolate on a pedestal, then we don't learn how to engage with it, and we don't habituate. So with clients, I'll have them make a list of these forbidden foods, and we'll systematically work with each one so that the chocolate becomes emotionally equivalent to the apple. So that's a goal for me, is that clients can keep chocolate or cupcake, whatever it is, in their house and feel like it's not this reactive, I need to eat it all. And yeah, sure, it's not helpful necessarily to have a house full of chocolate and ice cream, but to be able to know that you can moderate yourself is really an important skill. And through this work with clients, they're then able to go into the holidays and not feel so afraid of the exposure to all of these delicious, tasty things that we're faced with every day around this time of year.
Yeah, so I like that idea of satisfaction on a larger scale. So let's say someone's sitting there wondering, thinking, I love to have that large pizza. It makes me feel satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's different than, if I made a really nice hearty soup with like
Mm-hmm.
organic, kale and
Mm-hmm.
organic potatoes and stuff. So now I've habituated myself to crave the other thing that's more
Mm-hmm.
supportive of health. So how would you approach someone, or how would you help someone who's like, I feel satisfied when I have
Mm-hmm.
10 brownies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I like to ask the question of clients, if food and movement had no impact on your external appearance, what foods would feel the best? And chances are what's going to feel the best is not 10 brownies, right? It might be a brownie. And starting to explore how do you answer that question, oftentimes, for the client, like to help them answer that question for themselves, oftentimes if we have these rules, I can't have brownies, I shouldn't have pizza, I shouldn't have ice cream, then in our minds, when we get that opportunity, like, what if I could eat anything, what would I eat? Those are going to be the loudest, the ones that we're going to feel a really big pull to. But as we start to practice, even just mentally, taking away the judgment, being like, okay, all foods are okay. Now I can start to actually explore, okay, if every food is okay, let me go back to the brownies. Do I actually like them as much as I thought that I did? Sometimes we just really like something because it's a bad food, and we know it's like that inner toddler rebellion, like I'm going to want it then. We can actually start to be a little bit more critical. Like, okay, if I like brownies, well, is there a specific type? Is it the cheap ones, or is it actually a really good brownie? And Do I want it hot or cold? And then, yeah, listening like, okay, is it satisfying? But also, how is it making me feel? Because often if a food is making us feel physically uncomfortable or sick, that's not satisfying. So yeah, when somebody says, oh yeah, 10 brownies makes me feel satisfied, that's when I start to question, does it truly make you feel satisfied? Or is it just there's been so much restriction or mental shoulds around food or rules that you're feeling such a strong pull towards it?
No, I think it's so important. I'm hearing just through this conversation so much emphasis on compassion and listening to your body,
Mm-hmm.
being more aware of what's actually happening instead of just
Mm-hmm.
telling yourself what you think is happening. So, kind of, where can people find out more about how to work with you? Where can they check out your work?
Yeah, definitely. So I have my website, nataliejoffe.com. And so that's a great way to get connected with me and read more about my approach and philosophy. And this is a journey. This is a process. This work that I do with clients is not here's your 30-day meal plan, lose 15 pounds. It's really about exploring your relationship with food. And if you're in a place where you're ready to let go of that diet mindset so that you can take all of that mental energy you're focusing on food and hating your body and put it towards living the life that you want. You can read more about that. And I do free consultations. And I think it's really helpful to be able to be with somebody and work with somebody to be guided through this process. Because it's one thing to understand it intellectually, but like learning an instrument, until you can read a book on it, but until you actually pick it up and start to play, that's when you really learn how to navigate and develop the skill. So yeah, I would say, finding me through my website is probably the easiest.
Yeah, I totally agree. So one of my mentors had said, commitment without a structure is not actual commitment. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're
Yeah.
watching this and you're saying, this is the year I'm gonna make some changes, ask yourself, have you doing the things you have, or is there someone who can help you?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, definitely. And asking even just along those lines, like, okay, if you're feeling the pull towards a new diet, like, how has that worked for you in the past? How is this time going to be any different? And yeah, knowing that there is another way. And there's a great book out there that I'll mention. It's called Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole, and talks a lot about this philosophy and how you practice intuitive eating. So sometimes people are curious and want to do a little reading before they think about approaching it. So that's a good resource.
excellent. So thanks so much, Natalie. I think, if you're watching this, check Natalie out. Give her a call, see how she can help, and, move forward in a positive direction this coming new year.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Natalie.
so much. Thank you.
Okay.